Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Black Beat Podcast, where we take an unapologetically black approach to profiling the people and stories that are significant to our connectivity and advancements of our community. I'm John Washington. I'm here with my counterpartner, Fawn Aberson. And I'm the CEO and editor-in-chief of Flossin Media, your host for this Black Beat episode. Today, our guest is a good friend and vice president of Student Services and Enrollment Management at the University of Oregon, Dr. Roger J. Thompson. I'm going to pass this other part over to my partner, Fawn, because I didn't know this about my friend. A lot of this stuff that she came up with, I just thought Roger was just an exceptional fellow. But the rest of that, I'm going to let Fawn read some of this because it's distinguished.
Well, I'd like to take credit for coming up with, but Roger's got a pretty crackerjack team over there that, handles his profile. But there's still the man that has to make the profile, and Roger's done an amazing job. He's a nationally distinguished expert in strategic enrollment management and student services. The good doc has spent the past 13 years enhancing the U of O student experience with a focus on recruitment, retention, and graduation. In the 3 of the last 4 years, the university has achieved record enrollment for the largest, most diverse, and most academically prepared freshman class in the history of the institute.
Man, that is insane. That's why I had to listen to that for a second. Go ahead, Fawn. Finish
his dedicated commitment to equal education, access throughout his career, including the universities of Indiana and Alabama. Has also earned him kudos and accolades such as the Robert Vance Award.
Now see that. Now this is just going a little bit too far, right?
Yeah,
you can't.
Yeah. The Robert Vance Award was named in recognition of leadership provided by Federal Judge Vance, who was instrumental in enforcing the desegregation of the South in the 1960s. So to get an award like that, Roger's character has got to be next level. Next level.
Rod, Doc got that little charm. I don't know. He got that little innocent boy charm about him. I don't know what it is. You can't help but to like Roger when you walk up to him. Rod's got a smile on his face anyway.
Well, yeah. Welcome, Dr. Thompson. We're so honored to have you. And, let's get into it, Mr. Washington.
Hey.
It's great to be with you both.
Hey, thank you very much, Roger, for taking this time to come in and see us. Same, man. Anyone who has a chance to connect with you knows that you are a dynamic and strategic communicator. Tell us how you develop these skills, Raj.
Boy, that's a great opener, John. and I want to thank you.
I would say tell us where you come from, but I'll get to that one in a minute.
Well, first, thank you for having me. It's great to be at Flossin, and I've enjoyed our friendship over the years.
Thank you.
John, I'm a people person. I love people.
Yeah.
My whole life, I think I've over the course of my life, I've learned that if you listen to people, you get to know people, you'll find out who they are and what their interests are. And to me, that's one of the best parts of my job. I have the chance to get to know so many different folks in many different communities, students, families. And so for me, everybody has an opportunity to help educate me. And so getting to know many different people has just always been a way of life. I think it started, we all have family stories we could tell, but
well, tell us one. Right?
I will. My grandfather was one of these guys, God rest his soul. He never met a stranger, and he would go into any place, anywhere, anyhow, and he would just be introducing himself before you knew what was happening. And he always wanted to hear, who's the what's happening, who's important in their life, what are the things that they're doing, all of those things. To me, I just watched that as a kid, and so maybe I got some of that too.
Thanks, Raj. And maybe you have, bro, but because grandfathers are important. But,
Roger, let's not skip over that because you're an award-winning enrollment officer in communication. So, but seriously, there is a knack to communication out there, right? You got to be a people person and be genuinely interested. I think that's something that you have, but I think you and Mr. Washington might have this in common, the ability to read personalities. But also it's like, what do you do to improve? What do you do on a daily basis, or what did you do over the course of time from either schooling or mentoring or something that allowed you to get more fully present and dialed into, being able to have conversations with strangers that simply matter?
Digging deeper. But hey, Raj, before you go to that one though, but Fawn, that was a great one. But let me back up. Let's get a segue to who this guy is, okay? Let's ask him a little bit about where he come from. What was the motivators that got him to even begin to take this step to get to where he is right now?
And then wrap that into
I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Until in a place I was in the East Bay. So anybody who's listening who knows Richmond, that was where I grew up.
Do I know Richmond?
I know you do,
like
John.
The gunman in the street. It was one time, man, I walked out of a house in Richmond and stepped on the street, and I thought I was stepping on popcorn. There was so many bullet cases on the street.
Well, I mean, it was, it had its challenges in my day, but it was a great time to grow up in the East Bay, right? I mean, and as a sports fan, I mean, the Oakland Raiders were, they made my world go.
Oh, yeah. When the Oakland Raiders were Oakland. Right.
I ran around.
Branch and all this.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Frank Hawkins.
Cliff Branch. I mean, Otis Sistrunk's nephew lived down the street from me. So I got to meet Otis one time. And, but anyway, so we grew up there for a while. And then.
Did you play football, Roger?
I did for a while. Not like John did.
Long ballers, man. You got to get the long ballers in the house. We get tired of round ballers always.
Right. My knees are too. I have the bad knees to prove that I did.
Oh, wow.
But and then we moved to Oregon, right?
Yeah,
so we moved to Hillsboro, and it was a small town at that time.
Yeah,
I mean, it was like 20,000 people, and still pretty small. But it kind of has a lot of intel. Hillsboro has a different feel than it.
I feel like Hillsboro almost was set up just to receive families from technology.
Yeah,
industry.
and we actually weren't one of those.
Oh, you weren't? Okay.
But,
You must have been a farm family.
No, we were. My dad was a banker, and so he came up here to work for Washington Federal Savings. I don't know if that's still around, but
I don't think so.
So I grew up in Hillsboro, and communication was a big part of who I was. I think because. As a new kid, new areas, and sports always connects you. So when I went off to college, I was a broadcasting major. I wanted Bill Shanley's job.
There was two cats. Even Hope.
There
was the
you
same
go.
Way,
Okay.
No wonder they
right.
don't want to get
so
on
that
the
helps.
interview. Yeah.
That helps.
So we came to. I left the Oakland A's winning the 72, 73, 74 World Series. Of course, the Raiders, Willie Brown, beating the Vikings in the Super Bowl. That was when I was.
Who was that in A's? That was Jackson, wasn't it?
Yeah, Reggie Jackson.
Yeah, he was killing them down in there.
Yeah, they were all terrific. Right. And then we moved to Oregon, and of course you have the Blazers, and they won in '77, which was the second year I was here. So.
You thought you landed on the moon.
Yeah, it was pretty good, and so I always wanted to be a sportscaster, and I did a little bit of that.
Right on, right.
But Bill Shanley kind of had the Blazer gig wrapped up there for a while. So, but anyway, and so it's been great. And then my career, as you said, Fawn, it took me to lots of different places around the country, and so when the chance came for me to come back to the University of Oregon as a vice president there, having been at University of Alabama and Indiana and these other places, I jokingly told that search committee, I said, hey, you don't even need to send a plane. If I get the chance to work at U of O, I'll come walking back if I have to. Luckily, I didn't have to, but anyway, it's been good.
Yeah.
And it's been how long now at the U of O?
I'm in my 13th year.
13th year.
Yeah.
That's a good tenure.
It's been great.
That's a good long time.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So, Rod, let's talk a little bit about the state of education, higher education these days. Higher education is in crisis these days, and with student loan debt and at an all-time high. How is that impacting the work you do and the work you do at the U of O?
Yeah. It's, John, you highlighted it. We have some real challenges in higher education.
Yeah.
As states have disinvested, and unfortunately, our state is kind of on the front edge of that. So the state doesn't put as much money into higher education, and that's pushed all the costs to students and families.
Come on, Rod. Now, I'd let you do that, but I've been a part of some of them $600 million
well,
raises.
I was going to get to that.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get it, but you start. Okay, go ahead. You was building a platform somewhere. I know.
And so So the downside of that means that the cost moves to students and families. Right. And that wasn't the way it was 30, 40 years ago when states were more supportive. And I think what we've tried to do at the U of O is we've tried to come up with ways that we can invest in students and families and to open opportunities, particularly for students from underserved and underrepresented communities to come to the University of Oregon. And in doing that, our team and I have a great team that I work with back in Eugene, and Jim Brooks and I, he's our Senior Associate Vice President. He and I have worked together for 11 years at the U of O, 12 years. Oh, wow. And we worked together at IU. So I wanted Jim as my right-hand guy.
Oh, that's right. You brought Jim. Yeah,
we've tried to work together in ways that we would ensure, and we're proud of this. While our debt level is too high, it's lower than the state of Oregon average. It's lower than the national average, and we keep working to make it lower than our average. And so, but it is the challenge, John. And I think, we've got to continue. We've been fortunate because we have philanthropists and people that do give us money for great scholarship programs that other schools in this state don't have that opportunity to do. But with that comes the responsibility that we do things like enroll the largest class ever, for the 10th year in a row, the most diverse class ever, the highest academic achieving class. All those things happen, I think, because we have friends of the university that are helpful, and we try to strategically use our dollars to help students. But
I appreciate that, Raj.
I wish we could all have friends like those.
Yeah, I'm trying to tell you. At least we need to meet a few, right? So, Raj, outside of financial matters, okay, what kind of conversations are you having with the students and parents these days about education and about coming to the U, those types of things? Yeah,
we're talking to students and families about the return on investment. I think there's a lot of families that it's a big expense. I mean, to go to the University of Oregon or to get into higher education, that's the largest expense a family will ever undertake if they don't own their own home. If they own their own home, it's the second largest investment they'll ever make. Wow. And so we're talking to students and families and community members about, well, what's the return on that investment? What will happen for your kid, and how can we help your student create a better future for themselves? But that's a big, it relates to that first question you asked me. I think everybody is questioning higher education, and it's legitimate. They should. We've become very expensive in the last 15 years. And so we're trying to communicate about how do we help young people dream and imagine a future that sometimes they can't define, and then how do we help them make that happen? And so
you touched on a really, really interesting topic, Raj. I mean, when you think about some of the statements that you'll hear out there that come from leaders, community leaders, or people in our government or something, and most of them, and even entertainers and people who have made lots of money, and they'll go, well, I did this without going to college, and but when you look back on it, even as I look at my kids, their whole journey, of what's the incentive and how it starts so early for them. I mean, we literally, since, their parents went to college, we realized the value of college, right? So we started early enough to incentivize them in their minds and try to somehow or another culture them in that direction to find the significance in it. But there is some true significant difference in those who did go and those who didn't. But we'll get into that. So what approaches do you employ to ensure equitable access, opportunities, and educational achievement across the board, Raj? I mean, what are some of the things that you guys what approaches are you using?
Yeah, well, access is really important to me because as a public university, if you don't have access, well, you're not a public university. Right. And part of that is we need to make college as affordable as we can. So we've taken a few initiatives. I mentioned scholarships. That's really important. We're the only school in the state offering guaranteed tuition. So when you begin at the University of Oregon, we guarantee that your tuition is not going to go up during it's not going to go up during the 5 years. Well, hopefully you graduate in 4, but we'll hold it constant for 5 years.
Well, yeah, you need to get that 5 to make 4, right?
Right.
Well, but I mean, let's be honest. You have more applications as freshmen than you can allow in, right?
Oh, yeah.
You have to turn people away from the U of O, right?
We do. I mean, we had 38,000 applications for a freshman class of 5,000. So it was
of
very
5,000, you had
Very
38,000. So you had to turn 32,000 students away.
No, some of those students were admitted and decided not to come. But to your point, we do have, we have lots of interest, but maintaining access to the University of Oregon is critical, right? Public universities, in my mind, are built on two things. They're built on access and they're built on quality. If you don't have quality, you're offering students and families a false promise about their future. And if you don't have access, you're not a public university.
Right.
And access for me has been part of my career from the very beginning. I mean, you mentioned the Robert Vance Award. I'm really proud of that. I got to meet John Lewis and spend some time with some people that we could do a whole thing on that. That was really fun. But when I went to the University of Alabama, the reason I went was the president of the university wanted to be the #1 school for enrolling African Americans. And we were kind of dead last in the Southeast when I got there. That was a hard challenge because that's the place where George Wallace stood in the door and said, "You're not coming in."
Yeah.
And so that was a challenge that I really wanted. God rest her soul, Vivian Malone Jones. She was the young woman that was there that day in 1962. She became a good friend.
Wow.
And we wouldn't have been able to recruit African Americans and become the #1 school in the Southeast for their enrollment had it not been for Vivian. And the meetings I had with her in Atlanta were incredible, just to hear her story and how important it was to her to see that university change. And she believed when I said, we're going to change it together. And we did. And through that, I got to meet a lot of really interesting people also. And that award meant a lot because Judge Vance was an incredible hero at a really tough time. And he paid with his life. I mean, he was killed. I mean, they killed him because of how supportive he was of integration. And so
Wow.
I was really flattered to earn that. I appreciate you saying that. I don't talk about it very often, but it's one of those things that really, it means a lot to me. It's probably one of the highlights of my career. But anyway, back to access.
Well, wait a minute, man. Wait. Don't skip past that so quickly.
Okay.
But at the same time, no wonder you had that I walked with Martin Luther King look.
That's a great compliment, John.
I was looking at Roger. Roger always looking at Roger. Roger got something a little edgy. Like he looked like he walked with Martin Luther King.
But you know what? Being a part of a social change movement like that, and then what decade was that, Roger?
Well,
without
we were
telling
doing
on
that
yourself.
at the University of Alabama in the 90s.
Okay, so right, and it's the 90s,
too, no less.
right? And then fast forward to 2000 in the Black Lives Matter movement, and then the George Floyd thing. So when you're a part of a movement that really dictates change, and in the 90s, what was happening? Tupac and all those, there were gang warfare. You could listen to hip hop in some cities or towns, right? AIDS was running rampant and stuff. So there was a lot of social unrest in the 90s.
Right.
Not unsimilar like there has been today. So what was the key to being a part of that change leadership? Like, how were you enrolling some other people who were like, because sometimes change on that level is overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, it was a challenge. I mean, when I was a West Coast guy. So when I got to Alabama, and I had always been around sort of, I would call change movements, right? I mean, my parents hosted a Ron Dellums,
In Richmond.
Ron Dellums? What's that?
Ron Dellums was a congressman from the East Bay who made a big difference.
I remember him,
And, my mother was probably the only person in Hillsborough driving around in 1984 with a Run, Jesse, Run sticker on the back of her car. So,
I would say so, Raj.
there weren't many of those in Oregon, let alone in Hillsborough.
Tell me about it.
And so, but when I got to Alabama, that was... it was a bigger challenge than I thought. Wow. I thought I could kind of come in. I'd worked at USC. I'd been some places. I'd been kind of the assistant coach. Now I was the head coach, and it was tough. And one of the things we did in 2002 at that university, we celebrated 50 years of what we called opening doors.
Wow.
And Robert Kennedy Jr. came in to speak. Coretta Scott King. We had a lot of things going on that week, and that's where I got to know Vivian and Vivian Malone Jones, and she was just incredible. I'd encourage anybody to go read up on her. She was an amazing woman, and so I was talking to her, and I said, I got this goal that we want to make the University of Alabama the institution of choice for African Americans.
Wow.
And I think you're the one that can help me. And she laughed, and she said, how can I help you? And I said, I don't know, but let's figure that out. And she was great. We were featured in Jet Magazine for that integration or celebration in 2002. I bought 10,000 copies.
Was your picture in Jet Magazine, Roger?
I'm not
Was
that
your
cool.
picture in Jet
No.
Magazine?
No, but Vivian's.
It wasn't Ebony, but it was Jet,
But we bought 10,000 copies of Jet Magazine.
That's all right.
Wow.
And we put them in every kid's hands.
I know Mr. Johnson was appreciative of you.
Yeah. We were a big subscriber that time.
Yeah, you and me both. I actually had the time to meet him, and that's what really made me get into media, really.
Is that
it was
right?
Mr. Johnson, and his daughter, when they took over Ebony. And our Flossin was slotted to be a competitor to that magazine. Its original intent was to go against Ebony. Well, not go against it, but to sort of be in the marketplace, to be something in parallel in its content. In 2022, in response to escalating violence in the Northeast Portland, Roger, the University of Oregon established the Balmer Institute for Children's Behavioral Health. Tell us how and why this move came about, Raj.
Yeah, this is a great thing, I think, for Northeast Portland and for the University of Oregon. So Connie and Steve Ballmer, of course, was the CEO of Microsoft for a long time, owns the Los Angeles Clippers, and his wife, Connie, grew up in Portland. And so Portland means a lot to her, and she's a University of Oregon alum. And both of them together are concerned about what I would call underserved and underrepresented communities. And so they saw a crisis with children's health. You and I have talked about this off air many times, along with some of the leading therapists here in Portland. And so they wanted to make a difference in Portland. Well, it just so happened that Concordia University was also for sale in Northeast Portland.
Oh, boy, Rod, you scared by that. Boy. But all right, Sniper. All right, Sniper. I'm going to let you get down the road a little bit on this one. I won't pull you back. Go ahead.
So, so here was this opportunity for the University of Oregon, with the great philanthropic help of the Ballmer family, Connie and Steve, to really begin to make a difference in Northeast Portland. And I think one of the things that's exciting about what will now be University of Oregon Portland is we have the physical space. We now have the program, as you highlighted, that we're building out to work with, children today, and by children, really, I mean kind of K through 12. I mean, there's so much trauma in their lives. There's so many things going on that we need to be addressing as a society. Ooh. And that's really important to the Ballmers. And so it became this great opportunity for us to merge maybe some academic help, make a difference in Portland and in a community that I think is really important to not just the University of Oregon, but the state of Oregon. And so, so these things kind of came together in this great opportunity. I mean, John, you were involved in it early as we were announcing it. And so I think we have tremendous potential with what that can mean and how it can impact. And so I'm looking forward to see how we develop it.
Folks, Roger, as in his normal way, is modest as usual. but Roger, in support of what you're saying, and also some of the other aspects of this, two parts of it that sort of resonates for me. And I would agree about the trauma part, Roger. Is finally somebody's actually hearing that. I think the history of mental health in the black community, or the people of color's community, and their approach to mental health has always been a little bit skewed and suspect. We call it the white robe phobia. We don't, at least speaking from black folks, we don't go and necessarily sit on the couch. We're not that comfortable with that aspect of it. And it took the Board of Mental Health, and not only the Board of Psychiatry and Psychology, and all those organizations, to really begin to challenge themselves to take a look at how they sort of engage the community in mental health. And so, and for us as activists, as therapists, interventionists or whatever, we all knew historically that our community had these issues, but there was no kind of engagement to be able to move that needle. And we started seeing it produce itself or reproduce itself after a while. And then once we realized that trauma was 6-generational, we then began to understand some of the phenomenon that was going on in reference to that. So, but none of that, but then the second part about the Concordia part, okay, now, I love where y'all going with it, but it was so funny because Fawn and I and the organization that we were a part of happened to have some insight a little bit early on about Concordia and its opportunity that they were presenting. And it was so interesting how we took it to the city, right? And missed opportunity. I mean, because when we look at some of the need for housing, for communities of color to be able to grow, because you already know with the advent of some of the issues around gentrification and all that stuff that hit the Northeast in such a way to where it almost cut its population in half. And when we saw that asset come available, we thought it was we got rather motivated to see if we can get some of the powers to be to invest in that opportunity to bring on some other opportunity. But then, out of nowhere, comes this bullet or whatever this thing that came up from
like
Eugene.
light wind.
The longest shot ever shot. we can just do, well, who did what? And who had something to do with it? You said Roger had something to do with this?
No.
Ooh, I got to go get him. I can see it. But anyway, to see that you guys were able to acquire such a large asset and to put your money sort of where your mouth is. And we are really motivated, Raj, to support you guys and to making sure that this reality comes to light because, believe you me, the trauma and how it has affected people, communities of color over generations, and at least in the state of Oregon, this opportunity is long overdue, Raj. So.
But, John, with the Balmer Institute, Roger, like it's a 2-year program, but so if a young person... Can you what's the point? Like I'm instead of going to the U of O in Eugene, I'm going to have a special niche. So can you tell us about the profile and then the expected outcome?
Course track.
Course track or horse track?
Course track, not a horse track.
Course track.
Well, we got the horse track up the street.
Well,
it's now NASCAR, but anyway.
I mean, I think and first, I mean, there's so many people that made this happen. I appreciate you saying. I mean, I was proud to be one small part of how this came about. But I think what we're trying to do with the Balmer Institute is we will have students that start in Eugene and come to Portland for their last 2 years. We'll have students that start in Portland and do all 4 years. So some of the details around the program depend on what the student wants and how it works.
So it is a 4-year program.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the great things about the children's behavioral health is that we have a great scholarship that comes with it.
Gotcha.
That will take 40 Oregonians who are interested in this program, who have financial need. And I think the Balmer family was particularly interested in helping students in the community around the new University of Oregon in Portland, as well as just Portland in general. And so those students will have tuition, fees, room, board, everything paid.
Man, oh man.
And that's a tremendous opportunity for, we think, a lot of young people to come and study in a field, as John said, that is really needed. I mean, we have to get better in the way we're helping our young people.
Intervention.
Yeah, and generally students who've had, the direct impact to that kind of trauma tend to gravitate towards it. So you'll see a lot of people go into the medical field because maybe their parents or somebody had medical issues. You'll see a lot of people go into the legal field, because maybe there's been some trauma around some folks in their family that's been incarcerated and things like that. Do you expect to have a similar enrollment here from students who may have had some of this mental health trauma or this gun violence trauma and their daughters or brothers or sisters or of that kind of trauma? Do you expect to see them showing up in this? And then that's a whole other level of student, right?
Well, yes. I mean, so it's not just what we're doing with the Balmer Institute and that particular program. This is also an opportunity to grow other programs on that campus, right? Where we can move our programs that are in downtown Portland at the moment will move out to the new UO Portland campus that was Concordia.
So what you going to do with that building down there?
Well, that's probably
Rod, don't even try it.
a future discussion.
Well, I'd like to be privy to that conversation.
But so the students, right? They are
the
graduates.
students can move out to the new UO Portland campus. But to your point, I mean, I think the bigger issue. Well, I don't want to minimize what's being done with the Balmer Institute is huge, right? It'll make a significant difference in the community. But the secondary issue is, well, how does the University of Oregon become a good partner? How do we become a good community member in a part of Portland where we have not had a flag in the ground, so to speak? And so what does that mean in terms of economic development, and how do we partner in ways? I'm very thankful for the lunch we had a couple months ago. I felt like you gave me a doctorate in perspective and economic development and challenges in the African American community. And so I think those are the things that, as we begin to develop out University of Oregon Portland, that will give us great opportunity, I think, to make a difference.
Yeah. So, but just to close the line of conversation on the students of the Balmer Institute, so are they expected to graduate? And then when I think John and I attended a press conference that you guys had held, it was indicating that maybe some of these graduates would then show up in schools as guidance counselors or as behavioral specialists.
Behavioral specialists. Yeah, I mean,
I love it.
That's a part that we'll need state licensure to do, but we've had commitments from the folks in Salem that they're prepared to do that.
That's okay.
And so that's, we need those kinds of folks in our schools. We need students that come from this background to be in K-12 schools to help make a difference for students when they're at that formative age that helps them get ready for what's
mental
next.
health guidance. John, you think you always tell that story about the lady who led Black Lives Matter, and when asked the question, when
the narrator was asking her, if you had a reparations bag that you can give to every black person, a black family, what would be the things that would be in that bag? And the first thing she said would be an unlimited access card to mental health services. The first thing she said.
How about that?
And I looked at that. I looked at that lady and I said, "Girl, you hitting it right on the head." Mm-hmm. And because Raj, I mean, my whole history as an interventionist, man, over the years, I mean, we started out with looking at the state's drug and alcohol ORs. We're looking at how addictions were affecting the bottom line of certain demographics. And, of course, we're looking at the history of trauma that is related to the history of African Americans in this country as a result of slavery and all those things. So the manifestation and the impact has just been devastating. Yeah. And for us to have not, and even as simple stuff, right? When I think about my dad, when he came back from the Korean War as a POW, right? A wounded POW, they put him on the bus after coming back from Korea after being a POW for 4 months, and they just let him off on the corner downtown in the town, and just said, "See you later." Yeah. And that was it. And then he had 8 kids on top of that. Right. And do you think all of us? Now you see why I just get a little crazy every once in a while.
But John, you've been in this work for a long time.
Long time, right?
You have been involved in trying to help kids and in sort of dealing with mental health issues, your background in therapy and all those things that you've done to try to make a difference. And I think the hope of the Balmer family and the hope of the University of Oregon is that here we're going to give it a shot of steroids. Let's really juice this thing up and get it going. And I think that's
it'll be interesting to track that.
Yeah, I think it's exciting.
I'm not mad at him about that at all. I mean, I think that's probably he should get an award. They should get an award for that. Just that decision alone.
I mean, your father, but we talked about the trauma with these kids coming from these families. But John, you and I have both experienced kids who've graduated from college as well, right? And there's that, and Roger, we talked about that a little bit. There's that phase where you've just graduated and you're kind of maybe seeing some of your fellow graduate classmates already land someplace, and there's a lot of people who don't land. And mental health is so important right there. A wellness program coming out of that in a day. So how is the U of O doing with that kind of stuff?
Yeah,
and,
I think,
and will this kind of program maybe serve something in that area?
Yeah, I think we have to acknowledge that. I don't know what you two think, but I think it's really hard to be a young person today.
Oh yeah,
right.
I
think it's a lot tougher than my day. And you know that phone and social media creates this world that seems perfect. And most people's worlds aren't perfect.
Right.
And in fact, the people posting on social media, their world's not perfect either. But what they put out there via social media can really impact the people that are receiving those messages in ways that they feel like, well, gosh, look at this person, everything's wonderful for them, and it's not wonderful for me. And so I think it creates kind of this expectation that's a little bit unrealistic. Now, at the university's end, we've got to do a better job on career preparation.
Right.
Helping our students determine what the best path is. I read something, you all get a kick out of this. Well, it's concerning, actually. I read a thing in the Los Angeles Times. I spent so long in Southern California, I still read it every morning. And they were asking high school kids what they expected when they went to college and when they got done. And this young woman said, when I graduate from college, I'll get my dream job. I mean, think about that for a second. Yeah. Your first job out of college is going to be your dream job?
Delusional.
Yeah, it sure wasn't for me. Not that I didn't like what I did, but I don't think it was a dream. And so, but there's the expectation of where an 18-year-old young woman in Los Angeles is about what this is going to mean.
Yeah.
And so I just think there's a lot of work we need to do there. And,
Rod, it's kind of interesting because I don't know if you remember recently, I might have called your office. And it's similar to this kind of thing, man. And, you get a student in crisis. And I like the way the U of O has their crisis center set up and all that kind of stuff. But I think for some students, they require just a little bit more, man, at least some monitoring and or being able to allow them to assimilate into a normal protocol, but at the same time have these special needs. And we're able to insulate that special need or at least come to its aid in its way that doesn't ostracize the student or make them seem in the least bit. So I'm hoping that with the Bomber Institute in this situation here is that kids and young people who do have some special needs in that area can come to an environment, get a higher education, and not sink as a result of some of the peripheral impact, the stuff that is normal in college.
Right.
They struggle. After freshman, sophomore year, everybody won't go home. I'll tell you a quick story. I remember this guy, his biggest guard I ever seen in my life, named John Gallows, a kid out of New York State.
Okay.
And this cat was the biggest guard I had ever seen. And Rutgers brought him on, right? And it was all cool. We all go to the Piedmont for the 30-day preseason camps, right? Yeah. And so they got us out there, and we're in this military school named Heightstown, and all of us, and so we're doing the 2 days, right? And they come in, and the first thing they say is, the only way out of here is that little boat down by the dock on that river. Okay, and the river don't go that far. So, but if you want out of here, that little boat you can have. After about 5 days or 2 a day, 12 o'clock in the morning. They didn't tell us that it was connected to a bullhorn and everything. So if you got on it and started paddling, they knew. Everybody else knew too. So we came out there, and big old John Gallows is sitting out in the middle of the river crying. Tell me how long ago. So what kind of mental health services did it? But you know what, Raj? They invested so much money in John that John was able to make it to the regular season without he didn't seem like he went through camp. But John wound up going to the Jets. So, he did all right. Big boy. He did all right after a while.
Man, though, so you know what? But back to the whole thing, though, is when you look at technology and all these things that universities can focus on for the workforce of tomorrow, the fact that the U of O really prioritized mental health on this level is a big deal because so many people call for it, but not a lot of people actually put action to that. So it will be interesting to watch this.
It's going to be really fun to watch it develop.
Right,
and the University Health Services on our campus reports to me, and we've hired 5 additional therapists to try to meet the mental health need. We're still behind. We're still behind because it's so prevalent, and COVID in a lot of ways kind of highlighted that stuff and made it even more challenging. So,
all right, Roger, but I know you're a busy man, and you've given us a little bit of time. So the last question that I want to at least run by you here. Okay, now that the U of O is operating in the Soul District, you over here in the Northeast Portland, what type of impact are you hoping to make within the community, Raj, both business and residential?
Yeah, that's the part I really hope we will be able to deliver on, because I think the way a lot of us at the university, myself included, think about the Northeast community is, so now we're a new neighbor, we're a new partner, and there's a lot happening in the Northeast, right? I mean, you got the I-5 expansion, you've got a lot of things happening in terms of development,
right?
And we have, I think, expertise that can help, right? A good business school helps people think about how small businesses develop, helps communities think about how structure is provided. We have a lot of academic resources that can help. We have a great community team led by Matt Roberts that I'm sure people will get to know as we move into this campus. But I think it's about economic development. I think it's about opportunity. I think it's about being a good partner in Northeast Portland. I think it's about being a partner to help solve issues, and how do we help students and families get to higher education, get to the University of Oregon? That's a big piece. But a secondary piece is, how do we become a key partner as this part of our community strengthens and grows and develops? And I think we have a lot to offer there. And I just hope we recognize that potential.
Doc, if I was a betting man, well, let me back up because somebody might have heard that. Somebody might come in and get that. The bookie might show up at the door, right? You never could tell. I might need therapy next week, But the one thing I'm really excited about in the district is you guys' presence. It is almost like sometimes it's difficult to determine what's the obstacle that is holding us in suspended animation in the posture in terms of our ability to grow and advance as a community of people, as a culture, whatever. And what I'm hoping and what I'm seeing the potential for is for a village to constantly be sort of ravished by a tiger or a lion, but now to have had some kind of animal, some kind of protector, something that comes into that community that's equally as big as that tiger. You understand me? To at least begin to be the voice of a people who might have obstacles that maybe ain't nobody else talking about. They may be built within the fabric of the construct, whatever that is. But to have an institution of higher education, much like Portland State has played a part in a lot of these things, I am so glad to know that the big dog on a leash is sitting on our porch.
Well,
to keep them wolves off the damn porch, okay? Or at least be able to come to some solution on how to deal with them, because that's what the institution of higher education is really all about, Roger. It's about figuring out ways to improve on our condition, and the condition of people. So, with that said, this has been a barn burner, and I don't know if any of y'all know about it. I got my partner Fawn Aberson here online with us, and we got Dr. Thompson in the house. And let me tell y'all something. This is one of those opportunities and times that I'm excited about what I do to bring to you guys this information in time. So again, thank you very much, Dr. Robert Thompson, for coming in and talking to us and being a part of our podcast today. Hey, listen here, Black Beach Live well, and keep on coming with the information that you need. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, John.